So imagine this. You're staying at a cozy Airbnb in a quiet neighborhood, thinking you've got the whole place to yourself, and then the door swings open, and there's this guy standing there, looking just as surprised as you are. Yeah, that pretty much sums up the moment my life took one of those weird, unexpected turns. I just moved to this new city for work. Big career move, fresh start, the whole 9 yards. The Airbnb was this cute little bungalow owned by this older guy named Mark, who was super chill and helpful from the start. He gave me a quick tour when I arrived, showed me where to find towels, Wi-Fi password, all that stuff. Mark mentioned in passing that his younger brother, Ryan, was around sometimes, but I hadn't met him yet, so I figured no big deal. The day I met Ryan was honestly one of those you can't make this up moments. I'd had a long day of meetings and was just getting back to the bungalow, ready to change into something comfortable. The place was pretty small, just a couple of rooms, and the bedroom door didn't exactly lock. I was halfway through swapping out my work shirt for a t-shirt when the door suddenly opened. There he was, tall, a little scruffy, with this easy smile that instantly made me wish I wasn't standing there half-dressed, completely caught off guard. I froze. He froze. You know that awkward silence that's so thick you could cut it with a knife? Yeah, that silence. For a moment, I just wanted the floor to swallow me up. But then, instead of awkwardly backing out, he stepped in, still smiling like this was the most normal thing in the world to walk in on a stranger changing. Turns out, Ryan was home early from work and was just popping in to grab something before heading out again. He didn't even seem fazed, which only made me feel more ridiculous. From that weird introduction, something clicked. We ended up talking for a while that evening, and honestly, it was the kind of conversation that feels rare. Easy, genuine, with that subtle spark you can't really explain. I'd never imagined my Airbnb host's brother would turn out to be not just someone I'd get along with, but someone I'd want to know better. A lot better. And that's where things got interesting. After that first accidental encounter, I kept thinking about Ryan more than I probably should have. It wasn't like I'd fallen head over heels instantly, but there was definitely something about him that stuck with me. Maybe it was the way he didn't act embarrassed or awkward about walking in on me. He just handled it with this chill confidence that made me feel, weirdly, comfortable. Or maybe it was just the way his smile seemed to reach his eyes, like he was genuinely curious about who I was. Anyway, the next day I ran into him again. Not because I planned it, but because Mark mentioned Ryan would be around, and honestly, I was kind of hoping to see him. The two brothers were close, but Ryan was more the outgoing type, the one who'd come and go like a breeze, while Mark was more low-key and steady. Ryan was kind of like that burst of energy in their little family. That afternoon, I was sitting on the back porch, nursing a coffee and trying to get some work done on my laptop, when Ryan came outside. He was wearing a worn leather jacket, and his hair was still that slightly tousled mess from the morning. He plopped down beside me without asking and gave me this sly grin. "Hey," he said, like we were old friends catching up. "Hey," I answered, a little breathless, not sure if it was the surprise or just how nice it felt to hear his voice again. We ended up chatting for a while. He told me about his job at a nearby garage, how he loved fixing up old motorcycles in his spare time. I shared a bit about my work, though it felt kind of boring in comparison to his stories about engines and dirt roads. He had this way of making even the simplest things sound interesting. At some point, he looked over at me with those dark eyes and said, "So, you're stuck with Mark, huh? He's a good guy, but he's kinda old school." I laughed. "Yeah, he's great, but I'm starting to think his brother might be the real highlight of this place." Ryan raised an eyebrow, like he was debating whether to take that as a compliment or a challenge. "Is that so?" "Definitely," I said, feeling bold, though I should probably apologize again for the, surprise earlier. He smiled wider this time. "Don't worry about it. I've seen worse. And honestly, it's kind of nice to have a distraction around here once in a while." That was the moment I realized he wasn't just being polite. There was something genuine in his tone, something that made me want to push a little further. The days that followed got a little weird, in a good way. Ryan popped by more often, sometimes to borrow tools, sometimes just to hang out. Mark didn't seem to mind. The brothers had that easy rapport where they probably told each other everything. I caught Ryan watching me more than once when he thought I wasn't looking, and I caught myself doing the same. One evening, we ended up sitting on the porch long after the sun went down. The streetlights cast a soft glow over everything, and the air was cool, but not cold. Ryan was telling me about this bike he was restoring, how it reminded him of the first time he rode a motorcycle alone. There was this vulnerability in his voice, like he was sharing a piece of himself I hadn't seen before. "Ever done something that scared the hell out of you, but you did it anyway?" he asked, looking at me with a kind of intensity that made my heart skip. I thought about it. Yeah, moving here actually. Leaving everything behind. It was terrifying. He nodded, then reached over and lightly bumped my shoulder. I get that. I did the same thing a few years ago. Quit a job I hated and chased something better. Never looked back. That moment was something else. It felt like we weren't just talking anymore. It was like we were connecting on a deeper level. Two people who'd taken risks and were still figuring things out. After that night, things between us shifted. Our conversations got longer, and the teasing started to feel more flirty. Ryan would find excuses to be around the house, and I found myself looking forward to it more than I probably should have. I started leaving little things out for him, a favorite snack or a beer I thought he might like. He noticed, of course, and it made him smile like I'd just given him some secret treasure. One Saturday morning, Ryan showed up with 2 coffees and a bunch of beat-up old comic books. He plopped down next to me like we'd been best friends for years. "Thought you might need a break," he said, handing me a cup. We spent the whole afternoon sprawled out on the couch, trading stories and laughing over the ridiculous plots of those comics. It was so easy being with him, like slipping into a comfortable rhythm. At one point, he nudged me and said, "You know, you're not so bad for a city guy." I laughed, feeling warm all over. "And you're not so bad for a motorcycle grease monkey." He scoffed, but his smile was soft. "I'm way better than that." I realized then, I wanted more than these stolen moments. I wanted to see where this could go, despite the awkward start and the whole Airbnb host's brother complication hanging over us. But just as I was starting to think about what to say next, Mark called from the kitchen. "Hey, Ryan's got to run, but he left you a note." I unfolded the scrap of paper he handed me. It was a simple message written in Ryan's messy handwriting. Asterisk, catch me if you want. I looked up to find Ryan pausing at the door, eyes locked with mine, that same easy smile playing on his lips. And just like that, everything felt like it was about to change. I watched him linger by the door, like he was waiting for me to make the first move, or maybe just to say something. But honestly, my brain was doing that stupid, scrambled thing where I couldn't quite figure out what to say without sounding like a total idiot. So I just smiled back, nodded, and he slipped out, leaving behind that charged silence. That note, "Catch me if you want," kept swirling in my mind the whole evening. I kept picturing what it would mean to actually take him up on that, to step out of the comfort zone I'd been hiding in since I landed here. The idea of chasing after someone like Ryan, who seemed so sure of himself, so free, was terrifying and thrilling at the same time. The next day, I texted him something casual, more to test the waters than anything. "Coffee sometime?" The reply was fast. "Tomorrow. My place. 10 a.m. Simple. Direct. No room for overthinking." So the next morning, I showed up at his apartment, which was this cool little loft with exposed brick and a messy bookshelf stuffed with everything from motorcycle manuals to poetry collections. Ryan greeted me at the door wearing that same easy smile, like he was glad I'd come. We grabbed coffee from his tiny kitchen and settled into a corner of his living room. There was this vibe between us, like two people who wanted to know more but weren't rushing. We talked about everything from favorite movies to childhood memories, the kind of conversations that peel back layers you don't usually show to someone you just met. At some point, Ryan got quiet and looked at me in a way that made my chest tighten. "You're not like anyone I've met here," he said softly. "It's refreshing." I laughed nervously. I could say the same. "You make this city feel less intimidating." He reached out and brushed a strand of hair back from my forehead, his hand lingering just a second longer than necessary. The heat from his touch sent a jolt through me, and suddenly all those awkward moments we'd had felt like they'd been leading to this. "Do you want to get out of here?" he asked. I blinked, surprised by the question but not at all hesitant to answer. Yeah, I'd like that. We ended up walking through this little park nearby, leaves crunching underfoot, the air crisp but not cold. Ryan told me stories about growing up with Mark, about how they'd always been close, but completely different. He opened up about some of the things he'd struggled with, the choices he'd made that didn't always sit well with their parents. And when he talked, I saw something raw and real that made me feel lucky to be there, listening. We found a bench under a street lamp and sat side by side, the quiet city humming around us. I stole a glance at him and caught him looking back, his eyes softer than before. "Can I be honest?" he said. "Always. I'm not great at this whole whatever this is, but I want to try. With you." He reached out again, this time taking my hand in his. It was a small gesture, but it hit me harder than anything else that night. I squeezed his fingers, smiling. "I want that too," I said. From there, things started moving faster than I expected. Ryan invited me over more often, sometimes to cook dinner with him, sometimes just to hang out and watch old movies. We fell into this easy rhythm, like we'd known each other far longer than a few weeks. One night, after a late dinner, we ended up back at his place, sitting on the floor among empty pizza boxes and half-empty wine glasses. Ryan leaned in close, and before I could even think twice, our lips met. It wasn't perfect or polished. It was messy and real, the kind of kiss that tells you everything you need to know without saying a word. Afterward, we just stayed close, wrapped up in each other's presence. But even as things felt right, there was that little voice in my head reminding me about the complications. Mark, the fact that Ryan was my host's brother, the whole Airbnb setup. It wasn't exactly the neatest situation. One afternoon, as we were wandering through a weekend market, Ryan stopped and looked at me with that serious expression he reserved for only a few moments. "We should probably talk about Mark," he said. I nodded, bracing myself. "He's protective," Ryan explained. "Not because he's trying to be controlling, but because he worries about me, and he's going to want to know who you are. Do you think that's a bad thing?" Ryan hesitated. "No, I think it's necessary, but it might get a little awkward." I laughed, feeling surprisingly calm. "I'm ready for awkward." He smiled and took my hand again. "Good, because I want this to work. With you. Whatever it takes." And that's when I knew I was in too deep, but in the best way possible. Ryan wasn't just some unexpected guy who walked in on me changing. He was the guy the first wanted to figure all the messy parts out with. The question now was how we'd handle the rest of the story, and whether Mark would be friend or foe in all this. But somehow, I felt like we could face it together, because sometimes the best love stories start with a door swinging open at the worst possible moment, and a brother standing right there on the other side. The next few days felt like a whirlwind, but in a good way. The kind of whirlwind that makes you second-guess whether your life just turned a corner or if you accidentally wandered into someone else's romantic comedy. Ryan and I kept spending more time together, slipping into this easy groove where everything felt right, even if the whole Airbnb host's brother thing hovered over us like an unspoken secret. But the elephant in the room, or in this case, the house, was Mark. I knew sooner or later the three of us were going to have the talk. I could already imagine how that conversation might go. Mark giving me the once-over like I was auditioning for some weird family role, Ryan nervously pacing in the background, and me trying not to trip over my words or blush like a kid caught passing notes. One evening, Ryan and I were sitting in the living room of the bungalow, sharing a bottle of cheap wine Mark had left in the fridge. I was feeling bold, or maybe just slightly tipsy, so I finally brought it up. "Have you told Mark about us?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, but probably failing miserably. Ryan took a slow sip from his glass and shrugged. "Not exactly. I hinted, but you know Mark. He's the kind of guy who needs things spelled out." "Yeah, I'm guessing he's not the subtle type." "Nope," Ryan laughed, "but I want to tell him. I just don't want you to get caught in the crossfire." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "We'll figure it out together." That night, after Ryan left, I lay awake wondering how Mark would react. Would he be okay with it? Would he think I was a distraction? Or worse, would he see me as a threat to his brother's happiness? The next afternoon, Ryan and I agreed to face the music. Mark was home, sitting at the kitchen table reading the newspaper when we walked in together. Ryan gave me a quick, reassuring look before speaking. "Mark, there's something I want you to know. I've been seeing someone. It's not just a fling." Mark lowered the paper, looking between us, his expression unreadable. "All right. Who's the lucky guy?" I felt my heart pounding, but managed to say, "It's me." Mark blinked, then laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that took some of the tension out of the room. "Well, damn," he said. "Didn't see that coming." Ryan smiled, relief flooding his features. "We wanted you to know. I didn't want to keep it from you." Mark nodded slowly. "I appreciate that. And honestly, I'd rather have you happy than guessing. If this guy makes you happy, Ryan, then he's all right by me." I felt a rush of gratitude and something else, a warmth that went beyond just being accepted. Mark wasn't just being polite, he genuinely seemed glad. Over the next few weeks, Ryan and I settled into this strange but wonderful new normal. Mark even started inviting me over for Sunday dinners, cracking jokes and asking me about my work like I was part of the family already. It was awkward at first, but gradually those moments became some of my favorites. One late night, Ryan and I were sitting on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the cool breeze. The city lights flickered around us, but all I could focus on was him, the way his eyes caught the light, the easy curve of his smile, the way he fit so perfectly in that quiet moment. "You ever think about what comes next?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan looked at me, searching my face like he was trying to read my thoughts. "All the time. Honestly, I don't know what the future looks like, but I want you in it." I smiled, feeling something swell in my chest. "Me too." He leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. "We'll figure it out, one day at a time." And maybe that was the key. Not rushing, not worrying about the what-ifs too much. Just taking it as it came, with Ryan by my side. Because sometimes, the best things happen when you least expect them. Like an unplanned visit, a brother's approval, and a love that feels both like a surprise and exactly where you belong. Things with Ryan felt like they were moving at their own pace, comfortable and easy most days, but with that underlying current of excitement that comes from discovering someone new. We'd fallen into this rhythm where mornings meant grabbing coffee together before work, and evenings were for cooking something terrible but delicious in his messy kitchen while trading stories about our weeks. It was simple, but it felt real. One Sunday afternoon, Mark invited us both over for a barbecue at his place. He'd grilled a bunch of burgers and was playing some old rock records on a weathered speaker out in the backyard. Ryan and I showed up a little early, hoping to help out and maybe get in some extra time together before everyone else arrived. Mark was flipping burgers when we got there, and he grinned when he saw us. "Glad you made it." "Grab a beer from the cooler," he said, wiping his hands on a towel. I looked over at Ryan, and we exchanged a quick smile, the kind that said, "This is happening. This is real." As the afternoon wore on, more of Mark's friends trickled in, neighbors, coworkers, people who seemed genuinely glad to be there. I was surprised at how welcoming everyone was, how quickly the awkwardness I'd expected melted away. People asked about my job, joked about Ryan's bike obsession, and laughed at Mark's bad puns. At one point, Ryan leaned over to me, his voice low. "You doing okay?" I nodded, though my heart was doing that jittery thing when you're surrounded by people who barely know you but are sizing you up anyway. "Honestly, yeah. I didn't think it'd be this easy." Ryan's eyes softened. "Mark's protective, but he's fair. He wants to make sure I'm happy. And if that means putting up with you, so be it." I laughed quietly. "I'll take that as a compliment." As the sun began to set, the music got a little louder, and the crowd started to thin. Ryan and I found ourselves alone on the porch, the warm glow of the string lights casting soft shadows across his face. He reached out and took my hand, fingers intertwining naturally. "I'm glad you're here," he said. "Me too," I replied, feeling all the words I'd been holding back surge forward. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, the future us. I want to be part of your life, Ryan, not just as some fling or Airbnb guest, but something real. He smiled, that slow, genuine smile that made my stomach flip. I want that too. And not just the easy stuff, the messy, complicated parts too. I squeezed his hand. I'm ready for messy. But just as I was starting to feel like we were on the same page, reality crept in. A few days later, I got a call from my old place back home, something about a project I'd been working on that needed my input urgently. It wasn't a huge deal, but it meant I had to fly back for a week. I broke the news to Ryan over dinner, watching his face carefully as I explained. He nodded, trying to keep the disappointment from showing. A week isn't that long. No, it's not, I agreed, although the thought of being away from him made my chest tighten. The night before I left, we stayed up late, talking about everything and nothing, trying to soak up as much time as possible. When it was finally time to say goodbye at the airport, Ryan pulled me into a tight hug. "Text me every chance you get," he whispered against my ear. "I will," I promised. The week away was harder than I expected. I found myself checking my phone constantly, waiting for his texts, replaying our last moments together over and over in my head. When we finally FaceTimed, it was like a lifeline. Seeing his face made the distance shrink, even if only for a little while. When I got back, Ryan was waiting for me outside the bungalow, wearing that same easy smile like no time had passed at all. We picked up right where we left off, but the time apart had made something clearer. I realized just how much I wanted him in my life, not just as a fun distraction or an unexpected twist, but as someone I cared about deeply. That night, we stayed up talking about what we wanted, what scared us, and what we hoped for. Ryan admitted he'd been hesitant before because of the whole host brother thing, but now he wasn't willing to let that define us. "I want to make this work," he said quietly. "If you're in, I'm in." I nodded, feeling a grin spread across my face. I'm in. And just like that, the messy, complicated, wonderful thing we were building felt like something worth fighting for. Because sometimes the best stories don't come from perfect beginnings. They come from those unexpected moments, the ones that catch you off guard and refuse to let go. After that night, when we both laid all our cards on the table, things started to feel more real between Ryan and me. Not like before where it was easy and fun, but now with a little more weight behind each glance, each touch, like we were stepping into something that mattered. I was still living at the Airbnb, of course. Mark hadn't said a word about me moving out, and honestly, I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. The place felt like home, mostly because Ryan was around more often, and the three of us had settled into this odd but comfortable little dynamic. One Saturday afternoon, I was in the kitchen making some scrambled eggs when Ryan came in, looking like he just rolled out of bed. His hair was impossibly messy, and he was wearing one of those oversized hoodies that somehow made him look even more effortlessly good-looking. "Morning," he said, stretching and grinning at me over the kitchen counter. "Morning," I replied, flipping an egg and trying not to stare. He leaned closer, voice dropping just enough that I could tell he was teasing. "You're really making me crave breakfast in bed," I laughed, shaking my head. "Maybe next time." Before I could say more, Mark strolled in from the backyard carrying a bag of groceries. "You two look like you're planning some kind of breakfast war," he joked, setting things down. Ryan shot me a look that said, "Your move," and I realized maybe Mark was more involved in this than I thought. So I went for it. "Hey Mark, do you want to join us for breakfast? I'm making too much anyway." Mark smiled, that familiar warm grin of his. "Don't mind if I do." Breakfast turned into a full-on hangout. Mark told stories about growing up with Ryan, the dumb things they used to do, and the little ways they'd always looked out for each other. Ryan and I exchanged glances that said, "Yep, this is the family I'm falling into." Later that day, Ryan suggested we go for a ride on the motorcycle he'd been fixing up. I was a bit nervous, never been on a bike before, but I agreed. The wind on my face, the way Ryan handled the bike, like it was an extension of himself, it was freeing in a way I hadn't expected. We stopped at a small diner on the edge of town for ice cream. Sitting there, sharing a sundae with Ryan's hand casually resting on mine, I felt this quiet happiness wash over me. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, just two people who'd found something worth holding on to. But of course, life isn't all smooth rides and sweet moments. A week later, things got complicated. I was at the bungalow working on a proposal for a big project when Mark came in, his face serious. Not angry, but definitely concerned. "Mind if we talk?" he asked, glancing at Ryan, who was sitting on the porch steps. I nodded, following Mark outside. Ryan joined us, and the three of us stood there for a minute, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. Mark took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about you two. And, well, I want to be honest. This whole setup, it's a bit unusual. Having my brother and my guest together like this. I could feel the tension building, wondering where this was headed. But," he continued, "I've seen the way you look at each other. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't happy to see him smile like that." Ryan smiled, a little shy. "Thanks, Mark." Mark looked at me. "I guess what I'm trying to say is, I want you both to know that I support you. But also, if this ever gets too messy or complicated, or if either of you need me to step in, you just say." That hit me harder than I expected. All the worries I'd been carrying about approval and boundaries just melted a bit. Ryan clapped a hand on Mark's shoulder. "Thanks, man. That means a lot." I nodded, smiling. "Yeah, thanks." That night, Ryan and I sat on the porch again, the stars just starting to peek out. "I'm glad Mark's on board," I said, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Me too," Ryan agreed. "It makes this whole crazy thing feel more real." I looked over at him, his jawline outlined by the faint moonlight, the way his eyes softened when he caught mine. "You know," I said, "for a guy who walked in on me changing, you've become pretty hard to get out of my head." He laughed softly. "I was hoping you'd say that." We leaned in, the world quiet except for the soft chirping of crickets. This time, when our lips met, it wasn't just excitement or surprise. It was something steady, something that whispered of all the moments still to come. And yeah, maybe our story started in the most awkward way possible. But sitting there with Ryan, I realized that sometimes the best beginnings are the ones you never see coming. Weeks turned into months, and what started as a strange, accidental meeting became something that felt solid and real. Ryan and I found our own rhythm, not perfect, but ours. We had our awkward moments, sure. For example, when I accidentally left my toothbrush at his place, or when Ryan got a little too competitive at board games. But those were the stories we'd laugh about later. And honestly, that felt like the best kind of relationship. The ones built on everyday life, not grand gestures. One evening, Mark invited us both over for dinner again, this time with a few more people from his circle. The whole house buzzed with laughter and easy conversation. Watching Ryan explain something about a motorcycle part to one of Mark's friends with that enthusiastic grin made my heart do its usual somersault. After everyone had drifted off, the three of us sat together on the back porch, the city lights twinkling beyond the fence. Mark looked at Ryan with that familiar brotherly warmth, then turned to me and said, "You two have something good. Don't take it for granted." I smiled, feeling that quiet pride settle in my chest. "I won't." Ryan squeezed my hand, and without saying a word, that simple touch said everything I needed to know. Later, as Ryan and I walked back to the bungalow under the softly glowing streetlights, I thought about how far we'd come, from an awkward, unexpected moment to something that felt like home. Sometimes, life throws you those weird curveballs, like an Airbnb host's brother walking in while you're changing, and you think, well, that's a disaster. But then, if you're lucky, it turns out to be the start of something way better than you ever imagined. I'm still not sure what the future holds for us, but right now, holding Ryan's hand, I know one thing's certain. Some beginnings are messy and awkward, but that doesn't mean they can't lead to the kind of love that feels worth every unexpected twist. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way.